We're going to talk a little more detail here about American exceptionalism. I brought it up in our last lecture on key terms and concepts, but it deserves a little more time. American exceptionalism is the story we tell about ourselves, about the character of the American people, about our history, our present, and indeed the future. We should characterize American exceptionalism by noting first that most nationalities believe that their nation holds a special place in history, and the American people are no different. Evidence for this, in this sort of grand narrative that we tell about ourselves, is that the United States is a story of progress. It's a success story. There is in this grand narrative a sense that God has sanctioned American progress, the spreading of American institutions, the market economy, the Republican-style government, that these institutions have spread all across North America with God's approval. There is a sense here that the peoples that were here before the European colonists could be moved aside, and properly so. This brings us to a group that we're going to have to talk about over the course of the semester, and that's the Indians, or the Native Americans, as many people today call them. I think we should distinguish between these two names and determine which one is the most accurate. Certainly Native American is the most politically correct nowadays, but I want you to think about the origin of these two. Indians comes from a rather gigantic geographic mistake made by Christopher Columbus. You remember when Columbus arrived in the Bahamas, he believed he was in the Indies. The Indies, in Columbus's mind, were a large group of islands on the other side of the world. Well, Columbus is in a large group of islands, and he believes he's on the other side of the world. So it's no accident, and nor is it even surprising that Columbus would gather up all these natives and refer to them as Indians, believing that he's in the Indies. Now, why is Native American better than Indian? It isn't. There's not a dime's worth of difference between the two. Native American, of course, comes from another Italian explorer, Amerigo Vespucci, who sailed down the Atlantic coastline of Brazil in the decade following Columbus. Vespucci noted as he reached the Amazon River that such a river, so large, could not be supported by an island. It had to be supported by a continent. Vespucci's notes and charts and observations found their way back to Europe. There, a German cartographer, Martin Waldseemüller, published a world map in 1507, and we'll look at all these maps. In Waldseemüller's world map of 1507, there you have, for the first time, a Western Hemisphere. And across it, he printed Amerigo in honor of Amerigo Vespucci, who had supplied him with this information. Thus, we have feminized the name. It's not Amerigo anymore. Now it's feminized to America. You suspect Columbus is spinning in his grave right now of the rather offhanded way that the Western Hemisphere got its name. My point is that there's no difference in either one. They're both entirely incorrect. Neither Indian nor American have anything to do with the indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere. If you were going to call them something, you should probably call them by their tribal names, whether it's Sioux or Cherokee or Pawnee or Apache or whatever it might be. So whether you use Indian or Native American is of little difference. We simply don't have time to learn the various tribal names, so we dump all the Indians under one heading and move forward. Other aspects of American exceptionalism, there is a sense that there's no impediment, no obstacle that we can't overcome as a nation, be it economic, military challenge, political turmoil, whatever it might be. There's nothing that we can't overcome. There are two aspects of American exceptionalism that I want to point out to you and emphasize. First is American freedom. We think of American freedom, I want you to think of it as something organic, something that's very much alive. It's not abstract. It's not something you'd find in a museum. It's something that's very much alive in the world. American freedom expands to include people at times. It contracts to exclude people from its rights and privileges. Today, just recently, the Supreme Court ruled that gay marriage would be recognized in every state. That's obviously an expansion of American freedom. And we've seen it expand and contract over the couple of centuries with African Americans, with Native Americans, with women, with gays, with Latinos. Another aspect of American freedom I want to emphasize is that it's portable. We can pack it up and take it to other countries. If you think about the countries in which Americans now have military bases or naval bases, I think you'd be shocked. The invasions of Iraq and Afghanistan were in part an attempt to take the ideas of American freedom and transplant them into other countries. This, of course, is sometimes a success, South Korea perhaps, and sometimes a failure, Afghanistan, Iraq. The American people are quite baffled when American freedom is rejected, as we tend to think that our solutions are applicable to all other people's problems. Another aspect of American exceptionalism is the old English radical philosophy of republicanism. This has nothing to do with the Republican Party, by the way. Republicanism has about it a sense of civic virtue and qualities that pertain to the elite, but it also has about it a fear of concentrated power. And you'll notice that our government is built upon this premise. The power is spread very thinly in our government. You have a legislature who creates the laws. You have a president who enforces the laws. And you have a judiciary that interprets the laws. So republicanism has in it this fear of any power concentrated in the hands of one man, like the English king, who's viewed as a tyrant, and in the hands of one man or in a small group of people. So power spread very thinly in our government. You've all heard of checks and balances. This, of course, pertains to this idea. The purpose here is obviously to keep any one branch of the government or any one person from taking your liberties from you. What else can we say about American exceptionalism in this opening class? I'll mention that French nobleman Alexis de Tocqueville traveled to the United States in the middle of the 19th century, and he toured the country. He later would return to France and write a very famous book called Democracy in America. This is a book, if you get a doctorate in history, you will read probably. Still available in all libraries and bookstores. In this book, Alexis de Tocqueville makes an argument as to why the American people are fundamentally different from Europeans. He says that the American people are exceptional, different, because of a couple of things. One, a sense of personal autonomy and individualism. This is unlike the Europeans, where everybody belonged to a particular body of people, whether it's the church or a nobleman's retinue or what have you. American people prize individualism as opposed to Europeans, who are a part of something. De Tocqueville said that in America there's almost a secular faith in laissez-faire, the notion that the government should have no interference or no participation in the economic affairs of its people. This battle goes on even till today. We're entering a political season, an election cycle, and you will hear Democrats and Republicans constantly talk about the role of government, the size of government, where the government should participate in public life and where it should not. This is the old argument that de Tocqueville noticed in the middle of the 19th century. And of course, this argument goes all the way back to Alexander Hamilton and Thomas Jefferson and their fight over the role of government and just exactly what kind of country the United States was going to be. So, de Tocqueville, in addition to laissez-faire and individual autonomy. He talked about the power of populism in the United States. Remember the Latin prefix pop refers to people. Here he's talking specifically about the power of public opinion in the United States. This is quite different from Europe, where kings and emperors and sultans make decisions without consulting the people. As you all know from living in this country, politicians tend not to say anything in public until they've tested the waters, until they've run a poll to see how you feel about an issue. Recently, Donald Trump has been in the news a lot, and this is why. He doesn't seem to care about what people think, and this is why he's gaining a lot of publicity in the past month. So populism makes the American people different because they believe they have a voice in policy and in their government's actions. What else? De Tocqueville said at the heart of this difference, these qualities that make Americans fundamentally different from Europeans, he said that the American people never experienced feudalism. Now, feudalism is how the Europeans organized their society for about 1,000 years, from the end of the Roman Empire to the French Revolution. Feudalism has about it, I'll mention a couple of things. It's a distinct hierarchy of classes with the king and the pope at the top of this hierarchy, with the great noblemen, the great church nobles like the cardinals and the bishops. And then as you go down the pyramid or down the hierarchy, you see the vassals and the knights and the lesser nobility. And then finally, at the base of this pyramid, you have the vast peasantry. So it's a distinct, it's a society broken into distinct classes. There's very little mobility among these classes. Peasants don't rise to become noblemen. Kings don't fall to the status of a serf. You could also characterize feudalism by saying that it's a system of reciprocity. To reciprocate means to give back to. In feudalism, everybody owes everybody something. It's a reciprocal society. The king dispenses land and protection downward, down the hierarchy. The peasants send taxes in the form of food, whether it's wheat or beer or olive oil or whatever it is. Peasants send food up the chain while protection and land move down the chain. The nobility govern his kingdom, govern the king's domain. The vassals and knights fight for the king and protect the peasants. This society of hierarchy and reciprocity never existed here in the United States. Here, each man believes he can grow up to be president. And indeed, it's probably true when you look at some of the examples. Jimmy Carter, Richard Nixon, Bill Clinton. The sense of egalitarianism in the United States, de Tocqueville said, makes us different in that everybody believes they're as good as the next guy. This is not a sentiment that you would have found in Europe, where people knew they were not as good as the nobleman above them. So the absence of feudalism, the endless expanse of land and natural resources that we have here in the United States, played against any sort of creation of a feudal society, of a state church, of a noble class. In fact, American politicians go out of their way not to appear elitist or aristocratic because they know that such taking on of heirs will offend and alienate the very people whose votes they need. So I'm going to end this lecture on American exceptionalism. I want you to use this as a tool. I'm not telling you this so much for purposes of history. I'm telling you this so that you can use these ideas to evaluate the information that you receive, not only over the course of this semester, but over the course of the rest of your life. All right, thank you.